So the first thing it did was suck the water trap water into the chiller.
Oh, yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Right? It was in a vacuum. And then once the vacuum broke, it would just glug out refrigerant down the drain. And I got there, I don't know, hours and hours later. I mean, I don't even know, 'cause I don't know when that guy went there. And I was like, I was like immediately, I was like, oh, this is a problem. So I called the contractor and he's like, what? They're like, I'm not. He's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm not calling anybody on you. And this isn't like, I'm not the EPA, man. I'm not here to bust you.
So today's guest on the Chiller Guys has been responsible for recovering over 10,000 chillers and more than 40 million pounds of refrigerant. He's been working in the industry since he was 14 years old, a certified technician since he was 16. In 2002, he founded Rapid Recovery. That was later branded under A-Gas, and he grew that into a multinational business. In 2020, he founded a refrigerant management software called FM Hero to help companies and individuals maintain compliance with the EPA to avoid fines and other non-compliance issues. Welcome, Adam Dykstra, to the Chiller Guys.
Dykstra, you got it right. He's like, hey,
I was like, I had to think about it for a second.
It's good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's good. Thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to it. We had John on our podcast a while back, and I don't think that one's aired yet, but it's coming out soon. And so ever since then, we've been talking about doing this, and you know, I'm a bit of a nerd, like probably like most of you in the industry. If you're on a podcast on the Saturday after Christmas, you're probably, you know, you got a little industry geekiness in you. But anyway, I love to talk about this stuff, and I love to keep learning, and so yeah, it's good to be here.
For sure. The other day when I was on your podcast, you were talking about refrigerant recovery, and you were talking about some faster ways, and you were telling a little bit of a story about you know, a guy that wanted you to do it the traditional push-pull method, and you kind of I guess just showed instead of telling, you know. And do you want to kind of run through that and your method of recovery, give us some pointers, and yeah, give us your...
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I get to go back in my life field here a little bit. So I live in regulatory lands today, so I spend way too much time reading laws and figuring out how to make those simpler. But if I get my Wayback Machine, you know, we started Rapid Recovery, and the idea was kind of like a specialization of trade, right? So you've got, just like you guys are focused on chillers specifically, as opposed to the old school general practitioner who would, you know, drive around and you know, he would do your knee surgery and also help you if you had a snuffy nose like I do today.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd want my nose doctor doing my knee surgery. But anyway, so it was kind of that idea. And in doing that, we said, well, obviously the only way this works is if we can do something way better and faster. And so we started working on, you know, how do you do that? I mean, recovery is honestly not a complicated thing, right? You have a couple of hoses, a couple of tanks, and away you go. So I don't mean to over dramatize the ridiculously simple here, but when that's all you're focused on, you look at every single thing, like every fitting and every hose and every tank and the machine and all that. And we built a really big machine, and we called it the El Machino because we had too many margaritas at El Julio's. El Julio's had this like tortilla making machine, and it was called El Machino, which is the machine. And so we were like, yeah, that's what we'll call it. I mean, it was one of those, you know, classic entrepreneurial moments. So everybody really thought that we were so fast because of our machine. I love it. So I saw Drew's thing. I'm gonna have to turn the text off, or I'm gonna be like stuck in the text line. And they thought that you know, it was all about the machine, and the reality is it has a lot more to do with setup and technique, honestly, than it does the machine. So let me walk through this really quick. The obviously the basic premise of you know, recovery is don't vent it. You know, the gas has value. And then once you're like, yeah, I'm actually going to do recovery, and I'm going to, you know, get the value or reuse the gas, which of course is the same thing as value, right? Otherwise you got to buy new. So, and to get it out as fast as you can, because nobody likes sitting there around bucket time, watching a gauge, waiting for this thing to get done. And so, you know, the trick really is, and honestly, this is really simple and kind of fits our industry, but size matters. This is kind of the first point. So the size of your liquid hose, the one that's attached to the chiller going to your first recovery cylinder, is really, really important. And every valve and fitting in between is really important. So, you know, obviously you guys are chiller guys, so you're not recovering through a set of gauges, but right away I'd be like, don't do that.
Sorry.
So
flexible,
It-
and agile as a design team.
Is somebody unmuted here?
yeah, looks like somebody's unmuted. So you don't want to go through, gauges or anything. You want to get really big fittings, really big hoses. And so, and for our sake, we didn't really overshoot. You can only go into a tank so fast. So we did a 5/8 hose with 1/2 inch fittings. And that way we could get onto pretty much everything. And to put some to scale this, so we would do, a 1,500 pound, 1,800 pound chiller in 4 to 6 hours, all the way down to vacuum. So,
Fast, yeah.
I mean, that's fast. I mean, if we were on a chiller for 10 or 12 hours, we did something very, very wrong, which usually meant that somebody wasn't actually at the port on the very, very bottom. It usually meant that there was an economizer somebody didn't bother to pay attention to, and so you got a half full liquid, and now you're boiling it all off. All of the recovery time should be in the vapor phase, meaning you got to get that liquid out really, really fast, and you got to get it all out. And then you're going to sit and wait on vapor. And if you do this right, you're going to be sitting on the liquid part should go really quick. So again, size matters a lot. And then the other thing that we did is we and you can't do this in the field with what you guys are dealing with, but we reported cylinders and we put in full flow ball valves on our cylinders so that we could then have any restriction at the tank. The tank valves are designed like we used to use 240s, mostly because then I didn't have to have a forklift at every site. A 240 is a 240 pound water capacity, 4 foot tall, 15-inch diameter cylinder.
Yep.
They're not super common in the industry. In fact, I think when we were talking to Worthington, we started Rapid, they said that we were like 90% of their purchasing in the early 2000s because nobody really used them. That they're kind of hard to ship because you got to deal with them tipping over and stuff. Anyway, but we reported those, and I know that y'all can't do that. But the disc valves that are inside there are kind of bad. They slow you down. Now they're not as bad as like a 30 or 50 pound recovery cylinders. Those things are terrible, but they're not great. So even if we didn't have those, and a lot of times we had to order cylinders and couldn't get them revalved in time, so we're growing so fast, we'd put them out in the fleet, and you could still go really fast. That might cost, a half an hour on the liquid side of a recovery. And again, the majority of the time is in the vapor phase where the valve size doesn't matter anymore because you're not getting the vapor out that fast. So the other thing that we did is we said, we're scrapping this concept of a push-pull. And I know every school out there teaches push-pull, push-pull, push-pull. And the only way I can explain how that doesn't make sense is to put this in the end, this is a size issue. The whole goal on a push-pull is to take the hot gas off the cylinder, subcool the first cylinder with the liquid tank, the receiving tank, right? Lower its pressure and temperature so that more wants to flow in there faster. And then you run it through a recovery machine, but put it in hot gas. And if you don't have a hot gas valve, you just block off the condenser and shove it back in the top of the chiller. And that sounds brilliant. But when you consider the size of your machine compared to the size of that chiller, it's a losing battle. You're not going to add any heat. Basically, what you're doing is just dumping in refrigerant at the top, and the chiller itself acts like a giant heat sink, and it turns right back into liquid, and you just have to recover the same gas twice. That's it in a nutshell. Now, if your machine is the size of a pickup truck, and it's the same size as the chiller, yeah, you're going to get some heat in there. That's fine. But if your machine is the size of every machine I've ever seen in the field, or most of them anyway, unless some of these places have built-in recovery machines, different deal if you're talking about one of those big monsters. But if you're talking about even the machines we used, which were really big for the industry comparative, we couldn't make enough heat to do anything. So, and again, right now I'm talking about medium pressure chillers. I'll get into low pressure in just a second, but in a medium pressure chiller scenario, we did what we called a pull. So it's not rocket science. We sucked off the chiller, put liquid into a tank, sucked off the tank to subcool, lower the pressure, and then condensed it into another tank. And that was it. Didn't put anything back in the chiller. So there's some advantages to that, right? Like if your machine has got any contaminants in it, they're not going back in the chiller now. If you have contaminants in it and you're putting the gas back in, they're getting there anyway. But it really makes a big difference. So the other thing is on the vapor side is to get as cold as possible. And everybody knows that, people put, and even in the residential space, they'll put their tank in an ice bucket or something. A lot of times we had water cooled condensers. So, we would run a good amount of water through the water cooled condensers on our units. They were oversized. We put oversized condensers on every machine we ever built because trying to have a matched compressor to a condenser size on a recovery machine is the dumbest idea ever. Everything that we recover ends up with some amount of non-con in it, and that takes up condenser space and slows you down. So that was kind of the fast version of that, but pull, big hoses, less restriction in fittings, and then don't do a push pull. So, I mean, I'm really, that's it. I know people say that can't make that much of a difference. We used to get on sites. John, you were mentioning one. There were numerous ones. There are some brands out there who have very strict training protocols. We'll be agnostic here, not pick on any brand, but then they have a certain way. And if you don't do it their way, you're doing it the wrong way. And so they would hire us to come out and do it. And then they would tell us we had to do it their way. And we would say, well, we'll have to double the quote because it's going to take twice as long. And of course, then they'd get all huffy and mad. And then, sometimes we didn't win. Sometimes our guys caved and they would do it their way. And then they'd call after 10 hours on the chiller and say, this is taking forever. I told them it would only take like 6 hours. And what do I do? And it's like, well, you do it right the first time. Not mess. So it really makes a big difference. Yeah, I can, I guess the next one would really be, I don't know how many of the guys in your group are still working on low pressure chillers. I know they're kind of starting to go by the wayside, but
I think there's still quite a bit out there, to be honest. I think they're just moving to different refrigerants.
Yeah, not installing them at this point, but
yeah, not as much. Carrier actually came out with a low pressure machine as well. I think Daikin did as well. They have a double-ended low pressure machine. So.
You can tell how long it's been since I've been in the field.
Yeah. They're not our.
When I started recovering chillers, man, it was 11 and 113. 123 hadn't even been put out there yet. Yeah. So I'm old. So in a low pressure chiller, when you're doing a recovery, again, the push pull can actually work on a low pressure chiller, and it's not for the same reasons I just said about the size of the machine and the size of the chiller apply. So you're not actually adding any heat. Generally, what happens in a low pressure chiller is one of two things. One, your hose is not perfectly sealed, and so you're drawing in non-condensables. Or two, the chiller has a problem, and it probably has non-con in it. And so if you're pumping pressurized air into the top of the chiller, it's going to push the refrigerant out, which is nice. So, in fact, if we were taking the gas away, particularly in a scrap chiller scenario, we would pump air into them. I mean, you just got to stay under the rupture disc, and you could get that stuff out so fast. And then we had big condensers, so we would condense it down and then bleed off the non-con in the process through a non-condensable purge. And so we could get that air back out effectively, at least most of it. So I would say this though. So if you can't introduce air to your chiller, or then you need to do the same pull technique I was just describing.
Well, and this is for you're describing demolition, right? Like this thing is getting removed, and this thing is, you're not going to pump oxygen into a machine that you're going to work on again,
Yeah, that's right. So, and again, unless, I would say you could do push pull if you know that your chiller is super leaky, your low pressure chiller, and so it's full of non-con anyway, or maybe the non-condensable purge crapped out, and so you're full of air and you got to fix something else or do something else to it while you're doing it. There's air already in it. So then a push pull might make sense because the air that's already in the chiller, you're just using and pushing it all into the condenser, which is going to shove the liquid out, right? So I mean, I wouldn't introduce more air, but if it's already there, you can use it to your advantage.
One of the older trains literature, they described their recovery procedure was nitrogen.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's not an unusual thing. I think it sounds wild maybe to some people, but in their old literature, the stuff from like the 80s and 90s and stuff, it's use nitrogen.
That's what you did.
Pressurize it in the top, or even for leak checking. That's their leak check procedure. Fill it with dry nitrogen, oxygen-free dry nitrogen. Leak check the machine, and then start your purge when you're done with the maintenance. It's crazy.
Fire up that purge pump.
That is that was train's written procedure.
Well, they also used to teach to use drums for recovery. And if anybody's still using drums for recovery, you need to stop and get cylinders. I don't know if that's still a practice, but it wasn't that long ago. It was probably 6 years ago. I was in a chiller room and some dude was recovering into drums still. Don't do that. That's not okay. That used to be prescribed too. So in the old training manuals, that's what they'd tell you. So you got to use recovery cylinders, even for low pressure gas at this point. Now it's sold in drums, but you're not supposed to recover back into them at this point. So then if you take the air or the nitrogen out of the equation and you're just going to do a recovery on a low pressure chiller, I'll tell you this: the number one, other than the size of the hose, right? Same rules apply, but the number one big difference is that people don't check their. We call it our pull hose. I mean, it's so hard for me not even to say it. The liquid hose off the bottom of the chiller to the first tank. We called it our pull hose. I don't know. We weren't very original, and it ingrained in our guys to do a pull. But anyway, that hose, even if it would hold pressure and you leak checked it, those rubber hoses can start to get permeable, and especially under vacuum. So if you've ever tried to drink a soda or anything through a straw and you have a hole or slight crack in your straw, it doesn't go fast at all. So if you do it under pressure, you might not even see a leak. It might pressurize up and seal that up against against those fittings and so on.
Yeah.
So we would pressure leak test all of our hoses and not find any leaks. But then we would start doing low pressure recovery, and you could see in the sight glass that you had bubbles. And so we started making our guys have a separate set of hoses just for low pressure, because that way they didn't get damaged and used all the time, and and so on. But you got to really test that hose, see if it'll hold. Pull it down to 500 microns, put a cap on it, put a gauge on it, and see if it'll hold that 500 microns or lower, whatever. Just see if it'll hold it, because if it doesn't, that kills your recovery. Kills it. There's nothing that's worse than a hose that's permeable. And again, it's not leaking refrigerant out. So if you're using the same hose and you do some medium pressure chiller recovery, you're gonna be like, it doesn't leak. You got to do the vacuum tests. Voice of pain and experience on that one, because we did the same thing. We're like, oh no, it doesn't leak at all. It holds pressure. It's fine. And then it didn't. They wouldn't. So I guess that I'll leave it at that. If for recovery, those are my like fast fix stuff for the day after the holiday, or a couple days after the holiday. But I don't know if anybody has any questions, or has run into something that you want me to tackle.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions on anything that he went over? Do you guys disagree with anything he went over? You guys can hash it out.
That's right. Let's do it. Let's jump in the ring.
Anybody? Tom, I think you're on here too, ain't you? Tom?
All right.
No? Nobody?
It's okay. It's really straightforward. I know we in the past have gotten a fair bit of pushback on the idea of a pull versus a push-pull, but you just got to try it.
Well, I think that makes sense. I mean, like you say, it is just a giant heat sink. I think I'm just going to try it and report back,
Yeah, you can come back and tell me how wrong I am, or if you have problems, we can go for it again.
Yeah.
So that hose is a really big deal, though. I'll tell you, get a big fat hose on that, and short is super important. The closer you are to that chiller for getting that liquid to move, the better. We only let our guys use 10-foot hoses, so they had to park this stuff right at the chiller. So can you explain pull again?
Yeah.
Sure. So push-pull, y'all know, right? You take the liquid out of the bottom of the chiller, put it into a cylinder, subcool the cylinder by pulling vapor off the top, and then put that through your machine, cover the condenser, flip it to hot gas, and shove it back in the top. And that's supposed to create a pressure differential to help push the liquid out. Hence the name push-pull. You're pulling the liquid and pushing the hot gas back in the top. The problem with that is your recovery machine is tiny compared to the size of the chiller. So if you're taking that heat and you're putting it into a chiller, it's just a giant heat sink. It immediately condenses back to a liquid. You're not getting the advantage of the hot gas at all. And so really you're just having to recover the same thing twice. If you do a pull, you're just pulling off the bottom of the chiller, putting it into a cylinder, subcooling the cylinder, and then condensing it with an oversized condenser or whatever you can do to get it as cold as possible, and putting it into another cylinder. And I know it's like, again, it's super simple, and it doesn't seem like it would make a huge difference, but every pound or ounce of refrigerant that you recover, you don't want to have to do it twice. So,
yeah, and when he says subcool the cylinder, he just means you're reducing the pressure in the cylinder. So essentially,
right.
You're taking the suction port of your recovery machine, pulling off the top of that cylinder, and it's just physics. It'll just move because there's a lower pressure there than in the machine. And then he just takes off of that top of that tank into his recovery machine, and from that recovery machine into the other tank that is in ice water or some sort of a condenser or something that's going to condense that at the same time. So you're recovering that at the same time, which I think is brilliant, actually, because like you say, you're recovering the same vapor multiple times, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's just not something that, I mean, I think most people were taught push-pull method for recovering refrigerant, switching things around and going crazy. But I mean, you don't even have to really change that much when you switch to vapor. I mean, everything is exactly the same.
You literally just take that hose off the chiller, or not off the chiller, but off the what we call the pulpal tank, but off the liquid tank, right? The receiving tank.
Yeah.
And you stuff it onto the inlet of the recovery machine. So switching from liquid to vapor is really fast. So I need diagrammatic illustrations. I had a whole pile of this stuff because they used to teach us all the time back at Rapid Days, but I don't have access to that stuff anymore. But I'm sure we can mock something up and share it out with the group, because it's not rocket science as far as the diagrams go. So I could probably reach out to some of my buddies over at Agast, and they can ship me some stuff. Although they might not be happy I'm giving away their super trade secrets right now.
Well, just keep an eye out, you guys, too, on YouTube. I can go ahead and I can make a quick diagram to explain what he's showing while we're talking to it, and I'll just put it next to his face on YouTube, so you can see the diagram while he's explaining it.
Oh yeah, Tom, it's such a cool question. He said, "Have you experienced an electrostatic discharge from the friction? I heard that's a thing when you get going really fast." Yeah, it's awesome. We did a lot of recoveries on particularly grocery stores in the middle of the night, and they got they have 3 hours to get this whole thing done, recovered, repaired, change out a condensing tower, whatever, and then put the gas back in and get it back running. And so we would have to do like entire grocery stores in like an hour. Which you want to talk about fast. I mean, we could make a grocery store go. I think our record was we got an 800-pound rack done in 12 minutes. So now we're using the rack to help, but there are definitely tricks for that too. But anyway, when you're moving that much liquid through a hose that fast, it like when you're switching tanks, because we're filling a 240 like every 30 seconds on the liquid port. I mean, it's so fast. It's basically just pouring in there, and when you go to switch tanks and you're like got your hands on this thing and you move it down to the tank, it starts arcing across like an inch above the valve or above the brass. Like you see, you're watching it like a spark plug as you bring it down. It's very cool. Sorry, like I said, I kind of geek out about it, but this is one of those things that's like, that's so cool. First time I saw it, I was, like a 12-year-old's like, that's so cool. You want to do it again, except you got to do a job, so you can't. But it's really neat. Yeah, so we can come back. So if you come up with other questions on the recovery side, we can hit that too. I wanted to, if it's all right, John, just dive into regulatory.
Yeah, absolutely.
The regulatory side of this thing, of our industry, has gotten really complex, frankly, really fast. What started out with well, let's back up. I'm going to do a really fast rewind. So for those of you, if everybody on the call and listen to this later, let me just walk through how we got where we are. The general idea behind all these regulations is that we want to keep refrigerant from the atmosphere. That's it. It's the whole deal. And so then, of course, like anything done by the government, they're going to spend thousands of pages explaining how they want you to keep this stuff from reaching the atmosphere. And so, again, the basic premise of this is they don't want any venting. They want you to leak less. So figure out how to fix leaks. And then they want to use less harmful gases. And since they don't have very many mechanisms to do these things, they write a bunch of regulations and start working on various sections of the industry. So way back when, Montreal Protocol, this is a 87, the largest multinational treaty in the history of the world over refrigerants. That's a factual statement, and it's really weird. When that thing was signed, it was the largest multinational treaty in the history of the world, and it had everything to do with refrigerant. Super weird. We can't agree to feed starving children all around the world, but we can agree not to let refrigerants in the atmosphere. So anyway, they came out with the Montreal Protocol, and then later on, I don't know if you remember the Kigali Agreement. These things have come back up in the news over the last 5-6 years again, and that one we ratified. Well, they're hoping to have the same number of countries on Kigali by the end of 2026. Right now, it's like 160 again. There's 100, depending on how you count, 196 to 198 countries in the world. It changes, right? Because sometimes people are no longer a country when their neighbor decides they're no longer a country. So that happens. But so that's the background of how we got where we are. So in the United States, what this came down to, and this is true in all of in the F-gas world in Europe, Australia, all those places as well, the mechanisms are very, very similar. And so I might be describing it from a U.S.-centric perspective because I think that most of us here are going to be U.S.-based, but the same basic premise applies globally, frankly. The first is like they go, like I said, don't vent. They put a no vent policy in place. Nobody's allowed to just walk up and let stuff go anymore. And the next thing is, so we're going to get rid of all these bad gases. And so back in the day, it was the CFCs. So you got rid of 12, 500, 502, 11, right? Those were like basically with 5 gases in the 70s and 80s, you could do almost everything. They ran, if you were medium temp, you did this. If you were low temp, you did that. If you were filler, you did this. And that was it. That was the whole world. Now we've got, dozens and dozens and dozens of gases. There are some advantages to that, right? Some of these gases are more energy efficient in very specific applications. So they use less electricity. Technology has improved. So I might sound super negative about all this, but that's only because it feels like a lot of extra work for us folks in the field. So bear with me on that. I'm not trying to bash the whole concept. Frankly, it's just what it feels like when you're trying to deal with it and you're working, and all you got to do is get it to work, right? You want to just get your job done, put the chiller back up and running, and move on. So again, the first one was no ODP, ozone depleting potential. The next set was about GWP, global warming potential. So the AIM Act came out, and the AIM Act, American Innovation and Manufacturing Act, was signed into law by Donald Trump in his first term. And it basically had three legs to the stool. One was, we're going to force the amount of GWP gases, the high GWP gases coming into the country. 2, we're going to change the equipment technology transition from gases that use, or from systems that use those gases. And the third is the one that I'll focus on the most because it has the most impact on you guys in what you do every day, which is subsection H, which is the regulations on documentation, leak loss, leak repair, and that stuff. So the stuff that we deal with in the field. So all along the way, all the way from the Montreal Protocol to today, we were required to document the work we do. Now, that might come shocking because nobody teaches us the way they're supposed to, but we're supposed to write down every time we charge something, every time we recover something, and the something has to be identified uniquely. So the industry uses make, model, serial. That's typical. In your world, most of the time you can read those, and the rest of the package rooftop unit world, a lot of times they're sun bleached and painted in, and the rest. So those guys are harder to read, but we're supposed to document what system we worked on, where we were when we worked on it, what we did to it, whether we took gas out, and we don't have to necessarily document the contactor that we installed or if we had something like that. But anytime you have to open a system for major service, then we're required to document. That's on the technician in the field. They're required then to give that to the client, the equipment owner. And that's only true technically from the EPA's perspective in systems over a certain size. So back in the day it was, and you guys are all living in this land, but that was over 50 pounds and only on ODS gas, ozone depleting substances, gases with ODP, old gases, only on the old gases. And then that was it. Now, in the late 2010s, the EPA decided they were going to try to go after the IGWP gases because of things like Kigali and all that. And so they said, we can do this. We'll just say you can't do it. They got sued. It went back and forth for a couple of years. They lost. So it retracted some of the law. And then 6 months later, AIM Act was signed. So there was a whole 6-month window where it was actually where you didn't have to do it again from a documentation perspective on those systems. So that's a lot of history. Let me get to the heart of it for today. The thing that they care about today, the EPA cares about, in fact, the whole climate change movement on the refrigerant side cares about is keeping high GWP gases out of the atmosphere. And so in order to do that, they need to have proof whether you did it or not, did something wrong or not. And so ultimately for all of us, this comes down to documentation. So today, starting in 4 days, if you don't document and you give this to the equipment owner, every time you charge, recover, and open a system, the atmosphere, a major repair, CEPA defines it, on anything with 15 pounds or more, with any refrigerant that's an HFC, or an HFC replacement, so this would be like your HFO blends, all that stuff, that all counts. unless there's one exception, unless it's got a GWP of less than 53. So if you're talking about like CO2 or ammonia, like those are different things. But basically, everything that we're dealing with is gonna have this requirement. So what does that mean? It means that if you open it up, you have to provide documentation. It means that your client has to keep the documentation and maintain it. That means that you have to be prepared for an audit in case they say, well, what did you do? You need to know, which means you should document what you do for yourself.
So real quick, what is some of the ramifications of this? So like if a guy just doesn't know, right? Because I'm sure there's lots of people out there that have no clue what the documentation requirements are, what the penalties are for not doing it, and like what is the ramifications for the actual individual, and what are the ramifications for the facility that doesn't have that documentation?
Yeah, so that's great. If you're not doing this right and you can't prove it, because really it's weird. It's like you have to prove that you're innocent.
So you're guilty until proven innocent, kind of.
I mean, that's the way that regulatory side works, is because it's civil, it's not criminal. And so anyway, so you have to be able to prove that you didn't do something wrong. Because they require you to document. So if you're not, that's wrong right at the gate. So from a technician perspective, there are very, 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 I think very few cases where they actually went after technicians themselves. I think there's 2 in the entire since 1992. So they don't really tend to go after the technician. But when it's egregious, and you know, or the person on the other end, the Barney Fife is egregious, it's a big deal. So what does it mean? They can take your license and cancel it. So immediately you're going to be going from a chiller guy to an electrician or a plumber or something. I mean, you're going to be switching careers because you're not going to be able to continue doing what you're doing if you're not certified. And then they can fine you. And so they don't specify they don't restrict who they can fine this to. But the fine right now is over 59. It's almost $60,000 per day per incident. So now typically that's been only deployed against the equipment owner. So for example, you own this high-rise building, you got 4 chillers in the basement of this thing, and you have no idea what the factory charges on them. Technically speaking, just not having a documented say factory charge. Let's call it full charge. Forget the word factory. We'll call it full charge. You don't know what the full charge on those chillers are. And because you don't know, that's a violation. So just not having documented what full charge is constitutes violation. And then it's every day is a violation. So you get to, 17 days and you're at $1 million.
So can they say that, oh, you haven't known this for 5 years? So can they go back and do that? Or is it just
3 years?
Okay. That's crazy.
So 3 years. Yeah, it's crazy. So I mean, in 3 years, you're bankrupt. I mean, it's not survivable. And that's one chiller. You got 4 in the basement. So you're at $180,000 a day.
But really,
no, actually, what is that? It's 240,000.
That's probably leverage for them, correct? I mean, they probably don't actually bankrupt a lot of companies. They probably use it for leverage more, or do they actually say, "F you guys, you don't exist anymore"?
Yeah, no, they actually have a. I know I'll paint the dark picture of the EPA here.
I was just curious,
No, you're right. They actually have a poverty clause, so they can't bankrupt. Mind you, they wouldn't bankrupt an individual either, but they don't seem to think that taking your life's career is poverty bound for you. So they do that. Now they have a poverty clause, so they won't bankrupt a company. In fact, they really reduce the fines. If you see these fines, they're often not nearly as bad as what they should be. Example, there was a grocery chain in the New York area. This one just came out, I think, like 6 months ago or so. And they had 20, 30 stores, something like that. And their fines, when they started crossing $10, $20 million in fines, EPA just said, we're going to stop looking. There's no point. We're not going to fine you any more than that anyway. They ended up fining them over $10 million. And then the rest of the money, that they did, I know it's still a lot of money. And the rest of the violation really was what they call a consent decree. And so they enter into a consent decree with the grocery chain in this case. And they say, we're going to change out all of our equipment or 60% of our equipment to low GWP gases over the next 2 years. And then the EPA sits there with their hand in your pants the whole time while you do it to make sure that you're still not leaking. I mean, so basically you have to go fix all these leaks right away. Well, then you have to retrofit all this equipment. So they're doing that because the EPA doesn't get the money from the fine. It's kind of like the cop on the side of the road. He doesn't get like a bonus. He doesn't get a raise because he gave you a bunch of tickets. Or at least they're not supposed to. And so the EPA doesn't get the money. It goes into the general fund. But instead what they do is they say, hey, how can we get this money that we're entitled to as the EPA, instead do something environmentally good with it? And so they take that route. And then again, they have a poverty provision. They can't basically they won't shut a company down over it. But they're going to do it so hard it hurts. Safeway had one in the early 2012 era, somewhere there. That was $30 million. And they got another one from California for another $30 million. That was just the fine. Then they had to spend another couple $100 million in repairs and replacement of equipment. So
then
that's a lot of money.
EPA get involved? I'm just curiosity standpoint. How do they get involved from the beginning? Right? Like if they never reported anything and never claimed anything, how does the EPA get involved?
Well, kind of like anything else, you're required to keep documentation, and like the IRS, they can just come in and audit you. So that's legit. They don't do that. It's usually comes from somebody reporting something, and that reporting thing is way up. You know, everybody carries around a magical video camera. You know, in the 90s, we had these like shoulder-mounted missile rocket launcher camcorders that you weren't very secretive if you were trying to catch somebody doing something wrong. And today, you're probably being recorded like most of your life, you just don't know it. So security cameras get involved here, but a lot of times it's the nosy neighbor, the disgruntled employee. A lot of the contractor violations come out of disgruntled employees. They say, he told me to vent. We were behind, didn't have time to wait, whatever, and my boss made me vent. First off, that's self-confessing because you did the actual act. That's what it usually comes down to. And in the grocery world, it's that one's particularly easy for them because for the EPA, because there's so many grocery stores and they're so leaky. They're really terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys, like the average leak rate in the industry, according to Keely Whitman, who used to work at the EPA and now does consulting and has for a decade. She says that when she started in 2007, it was 25%. She says when they do their internal audits on new clients, it's 25%. Hasn't changed at all. So you wonder why they're writing. By the way, that's the whole deal. You wonder why they're writing more rules because they can't figure out how to convince the world, the industry, to do better. I'm being I'm genuine about this. Truly, we need to do better. If we fix the leaks when there are problems, stop throwing gas in the air, and we don't vent, and we treat refrigerants the way they're supposed to be, they'll stop writing more laws because we're just doing the right thing. We're doing what we're supposed to do.
Just good customer service too.
Of course.
Actually taking care of the customer, making sure the stuff works, making sure it's fixed. I mean, all those leaks end up in downtime eventually, right? So if a guy just walks up and throws 400 pounds R22 in it and walks away, it costs the customer way more money. That's obviously the environmental thing, but he's also going to have downtime in the middle of the night, so it's just poor customer service not doing it anyway.
You're 100% right. The thing is, ultimately, if we do better, it's better for the client. It's better for the whole ecosystem. The refrigerant shortage thing is our own fault. The recovery rate right now, or the recovery to reclamation rate, which is the only number that really matters for service gas, is like it ranges between 3% and 6%. The rest of the gas that we're using when we go out and put gas in to a chiller, we buy that gas is imported gas, stored gas. It's new manufacturer. So as the EPA restricts how much can come into the country, right, and how much can be manufactured, that reduces the service gas supply, which increases the price. I mean, it's like economics 101.
Yeah.
Simple economics. And so like 22, the price goes crazy. 410 will do it too. It's coming again. These things fluctuate too because of like weird crap in China and all kinds of stuff where there's supply gaps and stuff. But ultimately, we're going to see some pretty serious price jumps in some of these other gases too because there just isn't any. Like people aren't recovering it and sending it back for reclamation, and so you don't have it to put into a chiller. So now what do? You got a whole chiller and you can't even get the gas. Or you'll be able to get it. It'll cost you the price of a chiller to get it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I will say though, I don't know that I don't know that the government will ever stop writing laws.
No, they'll focus somewhere else. No, we had, yeah, maybe I'm optimistic. I don't know. That's probably true.
I would say with that one piece, I don't know. I think they're always going to write more laws, you know.
I see a recovery bucket for life. Man, I don't know how many of you guys like watch get on Reddit and stuff. Like it is rough.
Oh yeah,
It's rough.
oh yeah. Every once in a while, I see some dude in sandals cleaning out a condenser with 410A or R22 or something. You know, it's crazy what people do all over the world.
There's a whole thing, that, and there's some truth in every myth or in every scenario, but that basically back in the day it was DuPont and Honeywell were manipulating the system and coming up with fake news in order to get new refrigerants to be put out so they'd have patents so that they can make more money. That's not untrue. I mean, I don't know how much of the whole manipulation part was there. They all have lobbyists. It depends how you define. It's right. It depends on how you define the that leverage. But at the end of the day, somebody wrote that this is a stopgap. These new refrigerants, to some degree, they are. I mean, if you look way back when refrigeration first started, all the refrigerants they had were naturals. Right, like the only thing they had to do anything was natural. So they were using ammonia and water and sulfur dioxide and all this stuff. And today we're in a world where the reason they stopped doing that was because of safety. You get blasted with ammonia and you're cooked. So they said, hey, that's not great. Let's find some other stuff, and they invented CFCs and so on. And ultimately, I think where we're going to end up back is to naturals, CO2 and ammonia makes research. Ammonia has a big cycle. It goes up and down every decade or 15 years or so. It goes through huge swings. And I think, we're going to see the naturals make a major comeback long term, because we're getting better at figuring out how to keep the systems from leaking. We're getting better at that installation and safety sensors. We know when something leaks now. And so you can fix it right away rather than just having it all lose its whole charge. And so on. So the technology is going to improve, and I think there's some truth to that. We're going to see the chemical manufactured refrigerants kind of start to wane over the next 40 years. I mean, like, the problem is it's way past any of us, right? It'll start, but I mean, you guys are working on chillers that are 40 years old. So I mean, this is normal, right? So this stuff's going to be around a long, long time.
Well, and I think everything in the industry just goes in cycles anyway. They're going to go down this path, and they'll find that that's not the way they want to go, and then they'll be more conservative, and then they'll go back down the same path in 80 years from now, and they'll roll it back again. It's like, I think, human nature to kind of repeat the same mistakes over and over.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot on the regulatory side. I mean, we could talk about recovery too, but there's a lot on the regulatory side. As far as who's required to keep what. A couple of things I think guys need to know is it's not just about you documenting it. Your client, you can help educate your client, because they don't know a lot, especially in the chiller world. I think because they're not in the grocery refrigeration world, they just have this thing that makes the building cool. In fact, it's just a giant annoyance to them mostly. If it's either it's working and it's wonderful, or it's not and they're mad. Or if you're an IPC, it's a process, it's critical equipment, and so if it's not running, the plant's not making money. And so they don't care about the refrigeration. They don't care about the chiller. They care about whatever it is that they being comfortable, being able to rent the space, being able to make the part, whatever it is. It's really important that they understand your client, or if you work at the facility, that your boss, your plant manager, whatever, knows that they need to keep a leak loss record. So every time that you add gas, you're required to document that, right? And then they're required to keep that as a part of the leak loss record, and so that the EPA can inspect it. And this is true over anything over 15 pounds. So basically everything that is in any commercial space like this. And so, even if you're working on the chiller and they've got some other systems, they should know about all those systems. Like anything with 15 pounds is a big deal. And we're talking to HFCs, so that's pretty much everything right now. HFCs and HFO blends and all that. So they have to keep a leak loss record, which is every charge event over the course of a year, not like a calendar year, 365 days rolling. They have to take that and do math on it and say, what's the total charge? right? Full charge. And how much do we add? And when they cross a leak rate threshold, they're required to do a fixed process beyond just the normal stuff that you guys do every day. Now, first off, we should be fixing leaks if we find leaks anyway, right? We know there's a leak, fix the leak. That's how it starts. But if you don't, you come up to a system, or maybe a system hasn't been touched in a couple of years, and you get there and you find it's really low, and you throw in a bunch of gas because it's low. You just cross the threshold. You can say, well, yeah, but it's been running fine for 3 years. I haven't touched, haven't had to add gas. They don't care. It's the moment that you add enough gas to in a 365-day period to cross the threshold. So if you're comfort cooling, it's 10%. If you're IPC, it's 30, right? So you get a little bit more breathing room on the IPC side. But 10% is not a lot. It's really not. It's not a lot of gas. And so, I mean, you just gave an example. You throw a couple 100 pounds there. A couple 100 pounds often pushes you into that 10% world. So if you cross that, then you have a clock starts. From the day that you add that charge and discover that from the day you add the charge, whether or not you discover you're over the leak rate threshold or not, that's on you. You're supposed to know. They're supposed to know. You have a 30-day window to repair it, to verify the repair, then to get the system fully charged again, operating normally. So that could be at the same time, right? You could just, if you can valve a section off, fix a leak, whatever, and get it going again. It could be, but it's a second verification. So you have I had to charge it, I had to find a leak, I had to repair the leak. So the moment that you do that, you have a 30-day clock. Then you have to check your leak repair. Then you have to verify it again after it's at normal operating condition in order to reset that leak loss rate. So I definitely have some visuals I could give on this, John, that you could share with the group, because I've been talking about this a lot lately. That little sequence, that loop. And here's the thing: once you do the repair, you have 10 days. So you have the lesser of the 30 or the 10. If you did the repair, you have 10 days to do that follow-up verification. And you can go, well, yeah, I know it's fine because I haven't had any gas. That doesn't work. You literally have to document, yes, I re-inspected for leaks and didn't find leaks. So
which is crazy though, because I think, what if a guy's waiting for parts? What if parts don't arrive for 6-8 months?
Okay, so you can file an extension. That's a legit question. So if it's truly a part dependent thing, then you can file an extension to go beyond that time frame. But you literally have to file paperwork with the EPA. You can't just go, oh,
I don't think
we're good.
He's gonna do.
Nobody wants to.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another one. We have, that blows people's mind. You have they have the chronically leaking system rule, and you just by the name you think, oh, it just leaked a bunch. But the chronically leaking system rule doesn't really care if it was leaked or if a copper thief stole copper out of it. And again, if you're talking about like a big industrial chiller, in a basement or something, you're not talking about copper lines being stolen. But some of the guys, I'm sure, in your world are working on package rooftop chillers, right? Oh, yeah. And so somebody comes along, or it's on the side of a building. Somebody comes along and cuts something out of there or whatever. That is 100%. It counts against you. So now you put it back together and you find out there's a leak. And so now you end up at 125%. You're required, no matter what the reason, and this is the EPA for you. This one's calendar year based. In any calendar year, if you've lost more than 125% or more in any system for any reason, you're required to send in what I call the naughty letter. You have to self-confess to the EPA. We had this problem, and here's what we're doing about it. Here's how it happened. You have to there's a lot of documentation in this.
To me, because you would think, since we have like a Constitution and a Fifth Amendment, it seems crazy that you have to
self-confess.
Yeah, that's crazy.
No, it's wild. It's civil, right? It's not criminal. Okay. So, and that's how they get around all that. Because, all those things are criminal based, and then this is civil. So, we can make you do anything in civil.
That's crazy.
It's wild.
Take you individually to court to sue you? Is that how it works? Or?
They would go after the company at that point.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So the company, they would take the company to court and sue them in civil court.
If you refuse to cooperate, what they would do is they'd come in and they'd strong arm you and leverage you and abuse you, and then when you were done, you would feel like you were in prison before you got there. And then you'd pay your penalty, and you'd make the repairs or whatever. And here's the problem: they're not going to stop there. So the moment that they're in the door, they're in, and that's where it gets really terrible, right? The best place to be is ignored. Nobody wants to, they don't even know we exist. Perfect. Keep it that way. That's the key. That's the ticket. Just keep it that way. And I know a lot of guys are like, oh, they never they never do this. They do. They do a fair bit of it, honestly. I mean, as a percentage of the market, it's nothing. Okay. But there are multiple violations that are issued every year in the various parts of the industry. So it does happen. The chances of it happening to you are pretty low. But is that really, I guess, like, I'm not here to scare doom and gloom anyway. I mean, John, you had the right point at the beginning of this, which is do the right thing anyway, because it's better for the client, right? The fixing leaks so you're not pouring gas in the system that costs a fortune, take care of the system. I'm just trying to give you guys what the rules are so that when somebody goes, well, we're not fixing it. Yeah, you can go, hey, like there is another risk here.
Just so you know, yeah. No, for
Right.
sure. I think that makes sense. I think, yeah, some of that is just, I mean, they're getting into a tremendous amount of extra things that I think it's easy enough to have contractors, fill out their refrigerant compliance forms, submit them to the customers. I think most people that are working for either manufacturer or working for higher level clients, the higher level clients are going to want that. If you're working in the oil and gas industry, if you're working in anything that is remotely, it could be controversial, or it could be, they could be audited in some regard. They're going to care about all that stuff. So, I don't think it's a problem with that. But I think getting the actual end user to want to, or even know how to do this, right? Because either they're running a business, or they're running a school, they have a ton of stuff to deal with. I think a lot of it is they don't know how to do it, and they don't know. Refrigeration is like magic to a lot of people.
Yep, PFM.
Yeah, well, most people don't even know what refrigerant is. They don't even know what it does. I had a guy tell me once, a C-suite guy, he said, how do they pipe the gas to the unit? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, how do they get it? The city pipe the gas to the air conditioner to make it work, or how does that work? No, they don't.
Like natural gas.
It's like it's not that big a deal, but that's where I think a lot of people are. They just think it's kind of magic, and I think it's going to be difficult. I think it makes sense to do it from our perspective, but I think it's difficult from an end user.
Yeah, we got. We're FM Hero.
Probably know more than me. Yeah, with FM.
So for those of you that don't know FM Hero, we solve the regulatory problem by handling the documentation and ensuring, working with people to do compliance. And this starts with as simple as an app. So for all of you guys who are listening, our app is free, so you can download it and use it. For the client who wants to run their school or their school district or the grocery stores I mentioned or whatever, we've got aerospace people in this who have, just all their systems on their plant, and they're heavily regulated by the FAA. So they get audited all the time from third parties, and they audit for everything, right? They do OSHA compliance, they do EPA compliance. And those are third parties. They're there to ensure that their company is protected from these potential risks. And so, they're buying our software to manage all of their equipment at their site. So it's tracks repairs that aren't refrigerant related. They track their generator on it. They can do all kinds of stuff. So it's not just refrigeration, although we came at it from that perspective because that's our background. So anyway, that's what we do. And so, yeah, I mean, I get it. People don't care. They don't know. They don't even know how it works. It is PFM. And,
Is that what you found as well? Like when you get into highly regulated industries, they're like, yes, we need this. And the industries that are like, the local hotel and the, small grocery store chains and stuff, they're just like,
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your experience was, I figured you'd know more, but we worked with you've worked at the same customer.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, they're just trying to make a living just like the rest of us, and then this is just another thing. I mean, when we're, finding out OSHA has a big jump when we crossed 10 employees, we basically didn't have to think about OSHA at all. Not true, but we didn't have to think about it at all in our worldview. Under 10, we crossed 10. It was like, wow, there's a bunch of regulations. We crossed 50, and it was like, oh my word, there's so much more stuff that I didn't even know existed as a business owner. And so this is like that to them, right? They don't. I tease, I'm sure I broke the law 3 times before I even got out of bed this morning.
There's thousands of laws, man.
There's an entire Library of Congress just to regulate the crap out of us. But when the bigger the company is, the more responsibility that they have, or the more opportunity they have to get in trouble, right? The bigger target they have on their back, and so, no, it's worth.
So what are the biggest things, I guess, to give the guys to walk away? Like, I know you have your app. I've looked at it as well. It's pretty neat. What are like the biggest things that guys can do to make sure that at the very minimum, they're at least giving their customer the information that they need?
Yeah, I mean, you can.
Customer does get audited, you know. I know, Jason, I've done the same thing with the refrigerant compliance forms, EPA log sheets and stuff. What kind of information is, like you mentioned briefly before, but we got some more people tune in. So
Yeah. Look, all right. So the rules are simple in this regard. It's a unique identifier. So what system is it? And calling it just chiller 1 and 4 in the basement isn't gonna cut it, because chiller 1 is there's a lot of chiller 1s. Most of the industry issues make metal serial. Although sometimes you can't find a nameplate, so you can assign a new name. In our app, we walk people through that. With if there's a missing nameplate, we will help them find a legal way to say that this is this system. But that's it. So what system is it? Where is it? Who did the work? You did it. You have to actually sign for the work that you do. And then the type of refrigerant that's in it. So there's parts of it that are equipment oriented and parts of it that are service oriented. So if it's a piece of equipment, and then there's the crossover, right? So if it's the equipment, it's what gas is in it, how much is in it, or supposed to be in it, where is it, make model serial, and so on. And then on the service side, it's just, how do I know it's that piece of equipment? What did I do to it? And then tracking and knowing what did that do to, if there's a leak loss requirement, a tracking requirement on it. So the simplest thing is those forms. Now you have to be careful. Some of those forms were built in the 90s, and so they don't have all that. You got to make sure you actually have the right questions. It's not hard. I mean, it's a really short list. So make sure it's on there. If you're tracking gas in and out of the plant, like you actually, or off the schoolyard or wherever, if the gas is going to reclamation or if it came in from a supplier, you got to document that too. It's like what inventory. So if you're thinking in terms of you as an individual, if you have refrigerant on your truck, right, then you need to know what's on there. And then when you don't have it anymore, where did it go? So basically every pound of gas movement into your world and out of you matters. And so if it goes to reclaim, you got to document that too. So that's the gist of it. I mean, like in Hero, it's really straightforward. Like we use an app, it takes pictures and stuff and reads nameplates and all that. But it really just walks you through it. It's not rocket science. If you're trying to provide your client with the information in Hero, you can do it. As soon as you're done with your service, there's a button in it. You can email them a PDF and it just lists everything out and it covers all the stuff. So you can email it to yourself, you can email it to your boss, whatever, and that does it. If you're not going to do that, you should be using a paper form or some other way to say, this is what I did on this date on this piece of equipment. And then somebody needs to be tracking that leak loss rate, because everything you guys touch has got a leak loss rate on it. Well, the exception is, say somebody made the comment that they're using all HFOs. Straight HFOs are typically below the 53 GWP. So they're exempt because of their low global warming potential. If they're an HFO that is over 53, then it still has to do it. So it's not like HFOs are exempt. It's a certain GWP level it's exempt. So
do you know the
like VE
line as well? Are they going to get more and more? I'm guessing this stuff is planned, 5-10 years in advance, probably. It's not something that's like.
If you're in New York or California, it's not. Well, California did a pretty good job. I think they gave 3 years of advance notice on a bunch of stuff. New York came out with a rule in like November, and then went into effect like mid-November. It went into effect January 1. This is a year ago already, and then they had to pull it back because nobody could like your time to plan. So there's the Fed, and then there's the states. And when the states get ahead of the Fed, it gets really complicated. These rules overlay each other. But look, if you're documenting, it won't matter where you are if you're doing your part. Then it's up to the equipment owner whether they're going to actually do their part, which is maintain the equipment properly, like pay you to do the thing that needs to be done or replace it when it needs to be, and so on. Now, you don't have to be regulatory experts. That's not your job. But you do have to do your job, not vent, capture the stuff, and then document. Like that's the gist.
What I was curious about. What's the overall gist of the documentation? And then did you say guys are supposed to maintain those records personally for 3 years?
But actually,
guys have to do it.
Super weird. If you're working on systems over the threshold, then the EPA thinks of this like a piece of paper. And so like, who's going to have the piece of paper as if there's only one? And so they kind of describe how you pass the piece of paper around. So if it's over a certain size, then your job is you have to do it every time. Every time you're the linchpin, because if you didn't do it, and then that's a problem. Which, by the way, should put in the back of your head, like there's a risk here. So if you do it and you give literally the only one piece of paper over to the equipment owner, then it's their job to maintain it for that 3-year period. If you work on a small system, maybe you work on your own home air conditioner, right? And you're a certified tech, and then you need to send it off to scrap. And in Arizona, this is really common. They'll send like a crane company out to pick up the unit. And it's still got gas in it, and then they'll take it away. If you don't document that, that's on you, right? Because you didn't document it. You still have to document that that's what happened. The crane operator is responsible for the documentation of the recovery because it's less than certain pounds. That there's a sweet spot or weird spot between the scrap company at 5 pounds or less and the equipment owner, which used to be 50 pounds and now it's 15. That it kind of lives in la la land or no man's land. But here's the ticket. So they think about it like passing a piece of paper around. You guys need to think about it from the perspective of I would never give my one piece of paper to someone and not have any proof that I did that. I just wouldn't do that. So I mean,
what the actual what it is, I'm 100% on the same page.
What would happen is they would ask you, likely because you did the service, and they'd say, well, what did you do? And you'd say, I don't know. I mean, I work on this stuff all day long. Like, I don't remember that day 3 years ago or whatever, 2.5 years ago. Like, I can hardly remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday. So, but they'll produce some paperwork or something that they have, and then they'll start going down the road. Here's the thing. This stuff takes forever. So I got just a last little story. I was in the recovery business in my teenage years, late teenage years, and I worked for a company called Refrigerant Management Service, and I drove a pickup truck and I sucked out gas. And so I was at MSU, and I was recovering white goods like refrigerators and window shakers and their little like lab coolers and stuff like that. And I didn't like you. The methodology was to like you recover it, you pierce it, you suck it all, and then you're supposed to like hit the compressor with a hammer in order to free up frozen compressors so that the refrigerant caught inside the compressor could be released to the recovery machine. Well, I would do that, but still, sometimes you you'd smack it with a hammer and it wouldn't happen, and you'd tip it over and nothing would happen. Every once in a while, you'd tip one over and then it would finally release, right? And now you've got a hole because your toe isn't hooked up anymore where you used the piercing tool, and it would bend. So that happened at MSU, and they freaked out. So they called the EPA, and I was 17 or 18 years old at the time, and I got a letter. I got a section 1 or whatever. I don't know. It must have been a 114 letter. That's the way they work. But anyway, I got this letter from the EPA, and I really was like, I'm just trying to pay for school. Like, this is my side hustle. But I got this letter. I'm like the only person I've ever met who actually got a letter for venting. And then they called me, and we didn't.
Guys?
Then I never got violated. I lose my cert. Here I am today. I'm like the prison guy who says, "Don't do this, or you'll be in." No, I did an interview with them. They wouldn't tell me anything. The EPA told me nothing. They just asked me a bunch of questions about my process and what I did. They wouldn't even tell me. They didn't ever tell me it was closed. Like, I called them. I did like all this, like, because I was paranoid. And I'm like, what happens now? And eventually, just nothing happened. But I ended up going back to MSU and asking them, and they said, well, hey, it was venting. It wasn't our fault, and we didn't want to get in trouble for it. So, like, okay, well, and I walked them through what I do and how I do it, and it was actually good. They obviously were still a customer after that and all the rest. Things can go wrong.
Did they tell you they were going to report it, or they just did it?
No, heck no. I just got a letter in the mail. And literally a letter. Like, it's a scary day when you get this official EPA letter. I'm like, I already got my cert. What is this? And it's like, basically, I don't know, man. It was a long time ago. And back then, I didn't have a scanner handy or anything. I should have saved this thing. This is forever ago. And nowadays I just take a picture with my phone and I tell everybody about it. But it was super scary. So, and it turned out not to be a big deal, but this was all over one refrigerator's like 3 ounces of gas. So there's a little bit of a perspective. Yeah. So there we go.
That's great.
Well, I had the documentation because we documented everything. So I had make, model, serial. I even put a sticker on it with serial number. So I had all the stuff. So I didn't end up, I had to provide all that. But they never came back to me. They never got a new letter. Now, it could have been that I was in college and I moved like every 6 months in college. So maybe they did try to send me a letter and I just never got it. I don't know. But
yeah, no, that's pretty wild though. That's pretty crazy that they just reported you over basically just venting your hoses probably leaks more gas. Like back in
Yeah.
the, just cleaning, getting the air. So it's
As we're kind of coming here, Jason said, isn't there a level to be reached, like 13 inches of water column to be considered a quality recovery? I think I remember it was 608 test was like 13 inches of vacuum. If you're on a low pressure system, you have to go down to 25 millimeters absolute, which effectively is 25,000 microns is a recovery level. And sorry, I'm reading the commentary.
de minimis.
Sounds like, have you guys seen the meme? What's this like? Jenkins, whatever, Leroy Jenkins, whatever that thing. I don't know. I have kids, so that's what I see. And when you yell at de minimis as you're recovering, I can see that you're just like pretending to recover. Just, de minimis. Yeah, that doesn't really work. Yeah. Leroy Jenkins. So you have to go that low on recovery. If it's a medium pressure chiller or like a, not low pressure chiller and not very high. Like you guys aren't working on cascade systems, so I'm kind of skipping by some of that stuff, but anything other than low pressure in your world, you have to get down to 15 inches of vacuum at this point. So, and that's PSIG or, like on a normal gauge. It's not PSIG, but like, it's not absolute. Yeah. It's HG and it's not absolute. It's against gravity. So there you go. Yeah. And I have lots of stories.
That's all good. Does anybody have any more stuff on recovery as well? I think now is a great time to Leroy Jenkins. I think now is a good time to ask some more questions on either regulations or I think the regulation stuff seems pretty clear. If you guys haven't checked out their app, it's free, like he said, for all the techs to use. So you guys can download it and use it. It's free to keep track of all your stuff. And then if you guys have any more questions on recovery or anything, I think now is the perfect time. Did everybody understand the pull, or is the, I'll put a diagram up. Is that the only clarification we need, is a diagram for that? Maybe.
Yeah, if you get questions come in on the group or online or whatever too, I'm happy to jump in and answer them. Or if you get stuck on a recovery somewhere, I guess I'll warn the economizers can be real joy because they often don't have an access port and they often have liquids sitting in them. And so if you end up finding yourself in a spot where there's an economizer and there's liquid trapped in there, you're in for a rough day. Heat is your friend. So
maybe this would be an interesting thing if nobody has any questions. What's the worst thing that you've seen on the job? What's some safety things, some things that guys can look out for? I'm sure that you've seen lots of guys forgetting that it has a check valve or not paying attention to something, or maybe it's got a solenoid that's closed that he didn't realize was there, these kinds of things. What kind of like safety or recovery tips do you got?
Yeah. I think one of the worst ones as far as like just somebody doing something really stupid was that involved a chiller. It was a big low pressure chiller in, I think it was at one of the schools, universities in NorCal. I spent a lot of recovery time in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I'm trying to remember what facility it was at, but anyway, they sent over one of their just regular pipe fitters, and they were supposed to drain the water out of the chiller. And the guy didn't have any idea what he was doing, and he just hooked a garden hose, like threaded it, cut the end off because it wouldn't fit the thread of the flare fitting. It was a 5/8 flare on the bottom of the chiller, or a 1/2 inch flare or whatever it was on the bottom of the chiller. And he's like, I don't know why this hose won't fit. The guy said my boss said it should really just attach on and go. And so he hooked onto it, opened it up and stuffed it down the floor drain and then walked away. And of course it was in a vacuum. So the first thing it did was suck the water into the chiller.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Right? It was in a vacuum. And then once the vacuum broke, it would just glug out refrigerant down the drain. And I got there, I don't know, hours and hours later. I mean, I don't even know, 'cause I don't know when that guy went there. And I was like, immediately, it's like, oh, this is a problem. So I called the contractor. He's like, what? I'm like, I'm not. He's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm not calling anybody on you. And this isn't like, I'm not the EPA, man. I'm not here to bust you. But it was pretty rough. So I went right down the drain, and yeah, it's just wild, right? Somebody was 123 is liquid at 70. That's true. 11 and 123 are both right in that ballpark, mid 60s, 70. So I mean, it was in a chiller room in a basement, and it was liquid, coming out plus obviously it's in a vacuum at that point too, so it's sucking air in and lugging its way out. But man, yeah. So I don't know how long it was there, but there was nothing left. I mean, we recovered the vapor out of it, and of course now you have a real problem. Is you sucked all that crappy trap stuff in the bottom too. So whatever. That's pretty bad. I mean, from a safety side, man, I've seen it all. People are. I mean, you guys see this too, but we were on jobs, we're on demo sites, and people are doing crazy crap. And I mean, I don't know. It just goes. There's so much.
I like this stuff. I think all the guys like this kind of stuff.
We had some of our guys.
Drop names or anything like that. It's just just a story, you know.
Yeah, this one I wasn't on, but we had some guys on a roof on a mall that was being demolished, and they were up recovering rooftop units, and they had basically started taking this building down, and this roof didn't have any support underneath it anymore. So our guys are up there, and it's basically just hanging, and it hadn't collapsed yet. Somebody finally got on a bullhorn and started yelling at them that they weren't supposed to be there. Of course, they were supposed to be there. They were told to come that day at that time to recover all the units on the roof. Well, somebody got excited and got ahead of themselves, started taking the building down with the units still on it that weren't recovered. And so our guys are walking around on this roof, and there is no structural support underneath this thing at all. And so they came off the roof, and the contractor goes, "All right, I want to show you how fast this thing's going to come down." And they started munching on the sides of it. I don't know if you ever seen these cool they just cut through, and that thing was down in 5 minutes. The whole roof was down, and of course the units still had gas in them. So now you're like, well, there's that.
We tried.
No, they had gas in them before they collapsed. The roof collapsed. There wasn't any gas in them when they were done. Yeah, so that we've had that stuff. Then we've done recoveries. I've done recoveries on the USS Mercy when it was, I think it's decommissioned now. They did that. We did aircraft carriers. We've done cruise ships. We've done aircraft. We've recovered halons out of the fire suppression system on a 777. So pretty wild, pretty cool stuff.
They still use that on helicopters? Halon?
They still use halon in aviation all over the place, actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, it hasn't been manufactured since the 90s. They do actually that's an industry that has been really good about saving their product because it's mission critical. If they don't capture it and keep it, they won't have it. So they have huge, Boeing has a huge bank. Japan, actually, the country of Japan has the largest halon bank in the world. Anyway, they still use that. So when they make new planes, they still put in 1301, which is 13B1 for us refrigeration guys. I don't know, some random information, but they're still putting that in planes today.
Around the world for the most part, or
yeah, you can't manufacture. Yeah, you cannot manufacture 1301 anymore. It's a CFC, but it rarely gets used, right? So when they decommission an airplane. They go in and they take it out, and it's still in the container, and they have to take off they have these explosive valves. So they get the demolition guys to come out and deactivate the explosive valve that pops off that lets the stuff go. And anyway, it's pretty.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. Jason says de minimis construction at that building.
Yeah, so Jason, the B is just a part of its name. It's R13B1. It's not actually a B1 safety ASHRAE standard. So yeah, you're right. The Bs are toxic. So that would be, you have A1, A2, A2L, A3. This isn't one of those. This is just, it's part of its name. It's actually halon 1301, but the R value, just like water has an R value and ammonia has an R value, there is an R value to halon 1301. It happens to be R13B1 because R13 is a very high pressure refrigerant using cryogenic stuff. So it's 23 versus 123, which is a low pressure. So yeah, there's a whole how they number these things. So anyway, I won't get into that. It's kind of boring, but
oh, that's cool. Yeah, maybe not the numbering side of things, but
yeah,
some of the other stuff is cool. It's interesting to hear your perspective. Did you probably just seen a tremendous amount more than, and you're in the loop on all the regulations. You're behind the scenes and all this stuff, so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, but don't ask me how to fix anything. I watch you guys work, and I come into a room, and I'm like, you're tearing into stuff, and I'm like, it'd be so cool. I'm getting in there yeah, show me what you're doing. How does it work? And I get guys looking at me like, yeah, so you don't know. It's like, no, I really don't. I know how to suck. That's how I suck for a living. I
know how to get the gas out of it.
That's right. The easiest part of this entire job is I'm going to be done in about 3 seconds. No, I mean, it's really fun. I've learned a lot, and a lot more than you need to know to be a recovery guy, but just because I'm curious. I mean, I get on jobs and these refrigeration plants and these big chillers, and there's a lot going on. And, I eavesdrop on some of your boards and stuff. I'm John's invited me to like kind of sit in. I always wait for a recovery question or regulatory question to come up so I can pop in. But just even the questions that you guys are asked sometimes, I'm like, yeah, literally it's like reading a foreign language to me. I have no idea what you're even asking sometimes. So, have you ever done anhydrous ammonia? Yeah, ammonia is really like it's random. Like I'm just now going off chat. Ammonia and copper don't get along, which means ammonia and brass don't get along. And so recovery through any normal machine is a terrible idea. But if you don't know better and you're 18, you suck everything to that machine. If it's got pressure in it and they say suck it out, you suck it out. I've ruined a couple of machines doing that. It's a bad day. You can actually, in most municipalities, you can actually do that through a bucket. That's actually legit. Take your ammonia, feed it through a bucket. It bubbles through. It takes the toxicity out of the ammonia. And supposedly, this is not. I'm not advocating this practice, but from what I understand, that's still a normal practice. I did have a photo for you. Last anecdotal random story. I was driving through Tennessee. This is me. I did this. This is my own stupidity. And we had these El Machinos, which cost like 25 grand to build and hose upfit and all this stuff for this recovery machine. And I've got two of them I got one of them in my truck. I got two of them on a trailer, and I'm hooking through Tennessee. And we were doing 2 grocery stores a day. They were closing down all these Winn-Dixies in the Southeast. And so we were recovering 4 or 5 racks per store, and we're doing 2 stores a day per guy. Like my day was get up, go suck out an entire store, and then go start over again at the next store. And I'm cruising through Tennessee, and somewhere in Tennessee, I look in my rearview mirror, and there's only one machine on my trailer. And I'm like, no way. And I'm like, I get off, and I ran up and down that road for like 6 hours trying to find this machine. Some farmer is like, no, and this is a Honda gas-powered recovery machine, and it's all steel tubular frame. I'm sure that thing survived. It clearly didn't go through like the windshield of a Honda, or I would have found the scene of the accident. But I mean, can you imagine you're going down the highway at 70, maybe 80, anyway, miles an hour, and off the back of this truck rolls this machine, this heavy on wheels machine. And I'm sure it ended up in some farmer's field, and he's like driving along with his tractor. He's like, "What is that?" And he found the coolest air compressor he has ever seen.
You went back and you tried to find it, you didn't see it?
Oh yeah. I drove up and down this 15-mile stretch because I knew I had just come out of a gas station and it was there because I checked my load. I was trying to do the right thing, and it was there. And somewhere, I don't know if a pin came loose or a strap broke or what, but I was cruising along, and well, probably both because it was pinned and strapped. So I'm assuming my anyway, whatever. I'm driving along, and it was like, I don't know, 15 miles, and I look back and I'm like, holy crap, there's not one of my machines is gone, and I'm using these things every day in order to do, so now I'm like down a leg trying to do this job.
Yeah.
Anyway, I drove for 6 hours up and down that freeway, back and forth. By just trying, I'm like, kept going. If it hits somebody, I thought somebody would call the cops, right? Or they would pull over or something. But
Or like follow you and be like, "Hey, you lost something back there."
Yeah. Flash their lights at me, honk their horn.
Yeah.
I have no idea. So it was there when I left the gas station. It wasn't there when I looked back 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
That was kind of tops this stupid list.
That's crazy. At least you're the boss, though, so it wasn't an apprentice,
Well, that's true. Can you imagine if you're that guy? So it's me. I had to buy my own machine. Didn't file an insurance claim on that one. Tried to keep that one a secret for a long time. Then I realized I should start sharing all my stupid. Otherwise, I get to pay for it again when one of my guys does it. So I just say, like, I did this. This is really dumb. Don't do this.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
They can learn. So
learn from my mistakes.
Yeah, I think we can work on, John. You and I can work on getting some diagrams together for these guys, and we'll share them. Yeah. So, and then I got a leak loss loop too. I can kind of run through.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that sounds good.
Guys, I don't see a lot more as far as questions go.
Yeah,
I just want to say thanks for having me on it. I really enjoy this stuff. So,
yeah, for sure, man. It'd be great to have you back in the future too. So if you think of something that would be good for the guys, or if you got some stuff to walk through, that'd be awesome. So,
I'd love to. Thank you guys very much for especially joining on a holiday weekend.
Yeah, of course. We'll chat with you guys later.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Yep, you bet.
We'll see you guys later. I'll get you guys that diagram on social media here fairly quickly, today or tomorrow.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everybody.
If you guys would like to learn more about FM Hero and how they can help you guys maintain refrigerant compliance, you can visit fmhero.com. You can also download their free application for technicians at the App Store and Google Play stores. Thank you guys for tuning in and have a nice day. We'll see you next time.